This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio episode 765 on this Halloween. We've got gremlins in the machines and it's going a little late, but we will still get it done. This week we welcome Ken Siders. We're going to talk about the World of Life Church, the Saga ends, a cradle to grave restoration case study. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. We could not do the show without them. And don't forget, after the show, we can continue the conversation on afterthoughts.iaqradio.com. IAQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification, IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at IICRC.org. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are the Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at EIA-USA.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com, Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com, EMSL Analytical Inc. at emsl.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick@cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to report that Luis Suarez with Restore Right Bilingual Academy in Edinburgh, Texas, was first to identify Prince Rogers Nelson, also known as Prince, as Mid-Tennessee State University's #1 alumnus. Here's this week's IAQ Radio Trivia question. What hurricane had the greatest financial impact on the United States? Back to you, Joe.
All right, Cliff. Yeah, send me Luis's information. We'll get him a nice little package out
No
there.
problem.
And I know our trivia experts on here today, so hopefully Don will get that. Today's guest is Ken Siders. He is ETA's Senior Environmental Consultant. He's also the past Vice President of Environmental Services at Housecheck. Ken has over 20 years working as an environmental consultant, doing projects around the world, including for the Navy, Air Force, and TSA. He is also a commercial and residential building contractor and an expert witness specializing in structural environmental disaster response and essential responder services. Welcome back, Ken. Good to see you. You're muted there, buddy. There we go.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, good to see you. How have you been?
I have been well.
You've been busy, I guess, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
What do you mostly do these days? Is it more expert witness stuff or is it more like consulting?
So a little bit of both. I've really moved into the expert witness in the last couple of years. I guess it's a natural transformation when you've been in it this long.
And how is that different from doing the consult? I mean, it's kind of similar in that, you know, you're still probably out there monitoring projects and, you know, helping contractors get work done. But going into I know a lot of people would like to do more of the expert witness type stuff. How do you make that transition?
Well, it started kind of generically with the jobs that I was on. I was called as an expert witness in some of the cases. You know, usually it's pushed back from the insurance companies and they don't want to pay whatever the case may be. And so the client will call me as an expert witness. And once it gets there, you know, there are lawyers involved. And then from there, you just go over your own materials. And if you've done a good job keeping records, that's not that bad. And from there, I just began to get calls from different lawyers. And as you had, you know, 10 or 15 jobs in the works, some of them are ultimately going to go to court. And they don't necessarily get settled in court. A lot of them get settled out of court. But, you know, you get a name in that industry and you just begin.
you got a background too as a commercial and residential building contractor. How has that? I would imagine that's been extremely helpful in your expert witness work.
It really has, not just having that cred, but actually having, since the time I was about 14 years old, I've worked in the construction industry. And so, it was quite a bit later that I got into this industry. So I've built houses, I've repaired houses, I've been involved in construction failures, and then everything from small remodels up to 18-story buildings. So I really understand how buildings work, and that's really helped me a lot in environmental consulting.
Ken, let's go back and talk a little bit about. We had you on. It's been, geez, this project must be going on forever, Ken. I think it's been 3 years since you were on. We were talking about this particular project, the Word of Life Church, the Saga ends. We talked a little bit about the beginning, but if you could kind of fill in folks on how that project got started. It was the result of a hurricane, as I understand it. Tell us a little bit about what happened at the Word of Life Church and why this became such a lengthy project.
Sure. So the story begins with doing what we do often, which is just trying to help different entities. I've become involved in helping large and mega churches just by the fact that we've done several, and how it is when you get into a group, then the pastors know each other and they'll call each other. In this case, we were looking for a place to set up what we call our base camp. So unlike some people, we don't, the group that I usually work with, we don't get hotels because, that's for the local population. They need the housing in a disaster.
And let's clarify, was this, what hurricane was this and what part of Florida were you in?
So I was in Fort Myers.
Okay.
And that was Hurricane, was it Ian, I believe? I think it was Ian. And it was quite disastrous, a lot of damage. And we were going from business to business, offering our services. I was, and the group that I'm with was also. And this particular one of our group members just drove in looking for a place to set up base camp, and they have an exceptionally large parking lot. The pastor there said to them, well, we don't really have a problem, but you're welcome to set up here. He knew that we help churches. And we don't have a problem was a misnomer. They had an incredible problem. But like many people that, don't do what we do, they didn't realize they had a problem. I came on the scene the next day to do what I call a cursory inspection, just a walkthrough with the asset owner. The foyer is about 18 feet to 20 feet high. They had garbage cans in the foyer, just leaks that were like a slow running water hose coming from the roof. I said, sir, you actually do have a problem. Well, the answer often is, well, we'll just set up some fans and that's no problem. Well, that's never going to work. So I did a cursory inspection, which generally includes, a light moisture map and a flare, and just to see where the water was. We found out that the building, which was huge, I think the building is 36,000 square feet. It was soaked, and it was soaked from the top down. The roof, which was very interesting, we can talk about that later if you'd like, but the roof itself was multi-layered. It had, I believe it was 74, if I recall the number, 74 holes in it. The top layer being foam, and the foam, as you know, is water absorptive. And so 74 holes in a semi-flat roof. It was incredibly wet. Water was coming in to the second floor, and from the second floor to the first floor, and through the walls, through the I-beam structures, it followed it down. And the longer I was there, the wetter it got. The water matriculated through the building components, and it just became quite the challenge in that particular project.
What caused the holes in the roof? Was it ballast that hit there, or was it just a part of it torn off? Exactly what caused that?
Part of it was the rooftop air conditioners. They were blown out, the service doors.
Okay.
But a major part of it was a development, which was about, I'm going to guess, 100 yards away. The shingles, which were clay tile shingles.
Tiles, yeah. Impact.
Yeah, they were blown off, and they struck that foam roof with the Simtex coating and just tore it all to pieces.
So when you say a foam roof, so you got the Syntex, I'm not sure what that.
Think of it as a hard rubber coating.
Okay. And below that, how many inches of foam?
Uh, Depends on which side of the roof you're on, but 7 to 8 inches.
Oh, so this is multiple layers of foam. Is it like it's not sprayed on foam, is it?
It is, but it's a foam roof. It's a product that's used to go over flat roofs sometimes if you don't want to remove them. The church
Uh,
originally was a theater, and then a call center, but the former owners had put that roof on top of it instead of replacing the tar and gravel roof.
I've seen that before. So they sprayed foam over it. And was this a closed cell or open cell foam?
I believe it was an open cell foam, as I
Okay.
recall.
So
Hey,
like a
Joe.
sponge. Yeah, Peter.
Joe, instead of talking about all this, the PDF just hit. Why don't you pull it up? He's got all the statistics. He's got everything on there. It'll be a lot easier. You won't have to remember anything, Ken. Grayson, it's already hit my inbox, so it should be all in your inbox.
Okay. When Grayson pulls that up, we'll go ahead and look at those slides. But in the meantime, so we've got an old roof underneath this foam. Is that accurate,
Yes,
Ken? What was the
that
old
is
roof?
accurate.
What
Yes.
was that made of?
So that was a multi-layer tar and gravel type roof.
Okay. Okay. And then below that, we had what?
And then
Corrugated metal or
corrugated metal.
okay. And
And
then go ahead.
then below that was the superstructure and
Okay.
the supports that go across the superstructure.
And what kind of ceilings were in there? Was it drywall? Was it drop ceilings? What type of ceilings, or both?
It was a mix. There were drop ceilings and there was also drywall in some areas.
Okay. Okay. And real quick, you say there were rooftop mechanical systems. So was that the entire mechanical? All the mechanicals were on the rooftop?
Yes, they were. And it was interesting in that the mechanical system, because of the original design, used the overhead for return. So there were no actual ducted returns. So think of the overhead as a return, and the supply came down through the roof, the ceiling, whatever that might be.
So it was
But
a
when
return air plenum system type.
yeah,
Right.
so there was no real plenum to speak of for return. It used the overhead to actually return the air. So that meant that the attic, if you will, was completely open, and below in the curb below the 13 units, it was just open and it sucked air through there. The reason that's important, Joe, is that when the rooftop units access doors were blown off, then it was a direct hole into the attic system.
Okay. Okay. Grayson, you got the slides you can put up now? The PDF? We'll get a little visual of this, but I like to do it the way we just did it, Ken, because over half of our listeners download the podcast and listen in the car, so they can't always see these slides. So if you can, kind of describe what we're seeing on the screen here, that will help those that get this as a podcast. Scroll down to the next one there, Grayson. Let's see if they've got a shot of the church itself. Here we go. The church.
So, right,
Okay.
that is the Word of Life Church and just a small part of the parking lot.
Okay, let's scroll down some more, Grayson. We can see that's Hurricane Ian, I believe that was. Yep. And scroll down to the next one. All right, now here we go. There we go. Now we can see the rooftop itself, and let's scroll down one more. It got quite a few units up there. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like what, 15 units, I guess. That's a big place.
Hey, Ken,
Really
Ken, how did you take those photos with the drone?
Yes, that was all
Okay.
drone photos.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, let's scroll down a little more, Grayson. All right, now here we go. Beautiful. This is what we just talked about, the levels or the different layers of this particular roof system. Go down a little bit more.
So let me comment on that roof system.
Go ahead, please do.
Just with that picture you have up, that's perfect, Grayson. So what you're looking at is the way the actual roof was in the original build. And then below that is an example of what happens when they put the foam on top of it. So you see the multi-layers in the first picture at the top where you've got the pea gravel, which is the ballast, the asphalt, and the different things that you have there. And then you got your polyisocyanate roofing insulation. all of those layers were originally compromised because the roof had worn out. At some time, someone had decided that they would put this foam system over, which is exemplified in the picture below. That foam system goes on and dries, and then over that is a layer of a product called Simtex, or that's a brand name, so whatever it might be. And it is a rubberized roof coating, which keeps the foam itself from becoming wet. The reason that's important is if you can imagine the size of that building and all of that foam with the thickness we discussed, how much water that can hold.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's going to hold a lot of water. And there's looks like 6 or 7 layers there of the original roof. Man, somebody got talked into. Well, I understand as a building owner, you're kind of going, look, I've got to remove 7 layers of whatever to put on a new roof. If I can just spray over top of it, that's going to save me a ton of money, which is, I guess, unfortunately, sometimes saving money costs you money in the long run.
And who knows, even if they hadn't done that, with the amount of damage we had, they would have probably had tremendous damage to the roof anyway. If you can imagine clay tiles being hurled at that miles per hour.
Yeah. All right, let's go down a little more, Grayson. Okay.
So this is a drone shot of 178 roof punctures. I said 70 some, I forgot the number. So what happened is the insurance company was denying the roof. It's hard to imagine. And so as a stopgap method, the roof was, each little puncture was patched. And that kept the water itself from, it was a rainy season, it kept the water from continually going into the substrate. Of course, it presented a new problem in that when you have a hot roof and it's sealed and there's water in it, where's the water going to go?
Mm-hmm.
Down.
Yeah. Now, why did they deny this in the first place?
That's a long story. So the short story is the first set of inspectors that they sent weren't qualified to do a building of this size. Showed up unannounced, began to bark orders at people. And
excuse me, Ken, these are the insurance representatives or the building owners?
They were insurance representatives, and they were 1099 subs. We found out later they didn't actually work for the insurance company. They weren't qualified to do a building this size. And so, and I'm being kind because they really, really weren't qualified.
Okay.
We had water on the floor, and they said, we don't see any water.
Huh.
Hard to imagine that.
Wow. So did they pay for the patching?
Eventually, yes.
They didn't even want to pay for that.
Yeah, they have. I mean, they have to do. You got to have temp to perm.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Eventually, and this is eventually. When I say that, we're 3+ years into this.
Well, yeah, this is just now finishing up, and Ian was what, over 3 years ago?
Yeah, it's actually about to be re-roofed now. Finally, they settled, and after a very long series of depositions from myself and the other people that were involved.
They came to a settlement, and now the church can afford to go ahead and replace that roof.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, let's scroll down a little more, Grayson. Okay. This is your moisture map here?
Yes, so this was done with a Tramex Roof Master to show the saturation points. And I may have a slide, if I remember, that overlays the one to the other. But the interesting thing about this was done in a 10 by 10 block. And so if you look at the overlay, if we have it, you'll notice that the larger punctures correspond to the heavier amounts of water that was in the foam. And this is part of the documentation we do on a commercial roof so that, a year, 2, 3 years later, we have the documentation to show what exactly happened.
What meter did you use on this?
A Tramex Roof Master.
The Roof Master. Is that one you can push around, or is that one you've got to put on a stick, and that seems like a lot of work?
It's got a stick, but it's actually made to slide across the roof.
Okay.
Hey, let me jump in on that, Joe.
Go ahead, Pete.
That item used to be called years ago the leak detector, and but primarily for roofs, and they name it now like RSW is a number for it. It does have a stick on it, and it is kind of tough. That's different than the deck scanner, which they roll over the flat roofs. That's a whole nother ball game. So I don't think they didn't use that. So it is kind of tough. But that's the difference in those particular items. And and the stuff that John T does when he did his shows, he uses the deck scanner. Did that? He uses both meters, but that's the one that Ken used. It was and there's a couple different names they had for it, but it's not the real big one that you roll.
Very labor intensive there.
Yes, and could be backbreaking. Stick
All right,
helps.
let's scroll down a little bit, see if we have the overlay, Grayson. No, but what were we seeing here, Ken? This looks like some thermal imaging.
Yeah, so this is a picture of myself standing on the roof and shooting with a FLIR E6 just to show the temperature differential. And although the overlay is not there yet, it will show you that the areas that were noted in the previous picture with the temperature differential match up to the actual meter readings.
Let's scroll down a little, Grayson.
What time of day was that thermal scan, Ken? Any idea? I mean, did you do that at dawn or dusk or just during the midday?
No, Cliff, I think that was in the morning.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, let's scroll down a little more. What do we have here, Ken?
So if you can make that a little bigger, it's hard for me to see on my screen. Okay, so these are moisture readings in the foyer, and they're done by date. And what they show is that when we first got there, the first moisture readings, still a little hard to see, but it doesn't matter because the chart shows you the moisture readings that go up and down in the sheetrock.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, they also correspond to the heat that was outside. We talked earlier about that moisture being trapped in that foam.
Yes.
And as the roof heated up, the moisture had to go somewhere. And so it was pushed downwards as liquid moisture down in through the actual components of the building. As you notice on the right-hand side, we began, the contractor that was there began to dry it out. And we finally got to a place where it was a lot better. And then you notice the spike that's in there. That spike happened towards the end when we were having the last of the water. And so it was a real trial to get this building dry because as it would get warm outside, we'd have more moisture pushed down. And then as it would cool down, it would be better. All the time running drying equipment.
What kind of, were you using desiccants or?
Desiccants.
Okay. This
Desiccants
is big.
in the main building and LGRs and some of the small offices.
Okay, let's scroll down, Grace.
This is an example of the electrical room. This is an area that was sheetrock ceilings, so it didn't have the ability to dry from the top. So this is just an example of the documentation we do on a daily basis to show the moisture content.
All right, scroll down some more. Oh,
another example. This is the foyer north wall west by the water fountain. This is an area that was right below some of the larger leaks. And we brought that down little by little. I had to actually open that cavity to get forced air in there. We finally got it down.
Roll down a little more.
So here's our psychrometrics, which we also do on a daily basis to show what's happening to the air inside of the building. Some of the things that are interesting about this, you'd asked me earlier if about the first people that showed up as representatives. So they showed up from the insurance company and said, we're absolutely not going to pay for the drying. You need to rip out everything in here that's wet, and we're not going to dry it in place. And so the mitigation contractor, because they weren't going to pay for it, turned off the equipment for a short period of time. I was the representative there for the asset owner, and I watched the psychrometrics climb along with the moisture content of the walls. And so I made the call saying, regardless of what they say, we're not going to lose this building. So turn that back on, and you'll notice that we had it at the very left-hand side. We had it going down, and then with the equipment off, everything began to rise. Obviously, things are wet. And so the water continually came through the building. And then you'll notice that about the middle there, we started gaining on it, and we got it a little bit more dry.
And I'm wondering if they gave you authorization to tear everything out, why not tear it out?
Well, so that's a good question. First of all, this is a mega church that's still operational.
Okay.
And they're serving the community with food and things like that. So tearing it out would have closed the church down. And since they originally weren't going to even pay to have the roof patched, the pastor, the asset owner, had decided that they were going to continue operations. If they'd had torn everything out, they couldn't continue operations. And although the representatives said that, there was no paperwork to paper that up. And you know how that happens.
Yeah, you can't trust without something in writing that they're going to actually pay for it when it's all said and done.
Absolutely not.
Especially when they don't want to tear the roof off. But I would imagine with respect to tearing the roof off, I mean, if I'm in the insurer's camp, I'm kind of going, well, wait a minute now. You roofed over this old roof. I mean, we'll tear off the new one and maybe gets rid of the foam or something like that. But should we really be responsible for tearing off your old roof? Did that come up?
So I don't know if those exact words came up, but somewhere in this presentation, you'll notice we did core samples to show what was wet. So we cored all the way down to the miller deck, which is the corrugated metal. When we cored down to the miller deck, the hole actually began to fill with water through everything, not just the foam. So I would say they knew what kind of roof it was when they insured it. They understood that. It didn't go past the 2-roof system that's required in the state of Florida. So they were responsible for
it. Interesting. But I guess then my question would be, do you really think they knew what they were insuring?
Well, I don't know. That's not within my ken, so to speak.
Not your, okay, I got you. Let's scroll down a little more, Grayson.
This is not word of life here. This is in regards to the different places that we've done, and that may be the end of it. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a good overview now. So we get this far. You're drying it down. You're trying to save as much as you can. What happened in the end? Were you able to save? Did you end up having to tear out more than you expected, or were you able to save all the interior finishes and the flooring and of course, the roof we know is now going to be torn off and redone, but how did things go on the interior?
So we did save quite a bit of it. You can imagine, think of a large movie theater, which was the sanctuary. So 20-some foot ceilings, sheetrock walls all the way up. And we saved quite a bit of that. Some of it will still need to be taken out. For example, the insulation that's above it. Now that's not going to last. It got completely destroyed by water infiltration. There's going to be quite a bit of the drop ceiling that'll have to be replaced because it's damaged, water damaged. But I would say the most important thing to me, and this is a personal thing, is this church had the largest food pantry, I believe, in Fort Myers. They were serving the community from one of what would have been a theater, a giant room. And people came in every day, people that needed food, people that needed help. We not only saved some things in the church, but we really helped the community in that we kept a safe environment. We dried it out. We allowed them to continue to operate in this charitable thing that they did, and it helped the community.
With all the give and take, I would imagine, and look, you're looking at 3 years here now. I would imagine some of those areas you developed quite a bit of mold, but maybe I'm wrong. Did mold become an issue, and was that covered?
So fortunately, because of the drying that was in place, mold did not become an issue. And had we done what they said, mold would have become an issue without a doubt. We'd have lost the building.
Interesting. Cliff, I want to make sure you get a chance to jump in here.
No, I'm good. We're probably about halftime, Joe.
Yeah, let's go to halftime, Grace. When we come back, we're going to bring on the restoration industry's global watchdog, Pete Consigli, and we're going to finish up with Ken Siders here. Very interesting, talking about the World of Life Church, the Saga Ends, a cradle to grave restoration case study. AQ Radio's marquee sponsor is the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification. IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry at iicrc.org. Association sponsors are the Environmental Information Association. EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. Tramex Meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality, full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com. All right, we're back for the second half of our interview with Ken Siders. We're talking about the Word of Life Church, the Saga Ends, a cradle-to-grave restoration case study. Before I turn it over to Cliff and Pete, Ken, give me a kind of an idea of, you go in, you got the problem, you document the problem, you're drying the building down. What happens from there? I mean, do you end up in negotiations? Does one side threaten the other? Where do we go from there?
That's a great question. So let's touch on the documentation first. Without documentation, it didn't happen. You've heard that so many times. So I would say one of the most important parts of that I got to play a part in was the documentation every day. This particular project, I had quite a few going on at the time, but this particular project, myself or one of the people that were working with me were there every day. We took readings, we took pictures. I would just say, Joe, that at the end of the day, we put our report in a 3-ring binder. It was 3.5 inches thick. It was readings from every single day. The little, what would you call them? The charts that you saw?
Yes.
There were hundreds
Graphs.
of those. The graphs, there were hundreds of those, proving, in fact, A, that the drying equipment was working. That's important to document that. B, that the drying itself was working. And C, that someone actually documented that. That became invaluable later. To your second question. So, of course, in this case, the insurance company balked. They did not want to pay for it. And they, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I want you to know that, I think they were in bad faith over the whole issue. So without the documentation later, which, that was 3 years later, I had a 5.5-hour deposition from several lawyers who asked me questions. How would I remember that, 100 jobs later? But I got to go back, go through all the documentation, provided that to them. They asked me questions. They wanted to know for instance, in this case, there was E. coli and coliform throughout the building. And it was very high levels. They wanted to know, what's the problem with that? And where's your documentation for that? Of course, we had all the lab reports. Everything was concise and order. We went over it over and over again before we actually made the book to be sure that everything matched. When I say matched, that is, the day was there, the date was there, the documentation was there, pictures backed up the graphs, everything was in order. And that in itself really helped in that 5.5 hour deposition that I was in, to show that we didn't just poke our finger at something and say, look, it's wet. We had accredited lab reports. We had pictures that backed up every single graph, and the pictures were dated. The graph itself would refer to the pictures. When I say pictures, there were pictures of moisture meters, pictures of who was doing it, pictures of the area, and not just a picture of a meter on a wall that you can't tell where it is. A picture of the meter on the wall, then a relational picture. So you're back away so you can tell, for instance, in the one graph we looked at, the water fountain in the main foyer. That water fountain was a problem, that wall at that water fountain. Every day there was a picture of the meter reading at that. There was a picture that showed the meter in place. Every single sample had pictures to show where they were sampled, not just the sample itself being taken, but relational photos so you could tell that sample with that sample number was taken in that location. All of that together became the process by which the church itself won.
Now, during this whole process, I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, the church is paying you directly. They're not getting any reimbursement from the insurance company for what you're doing. That's not cheap.
No, it's not. But in this case, the pastor, well, he was a good businessman in that he understood that this was going to be a fight. And he and I sat down and I discussed what we could provide, what ETA could provide, and how invaluable that would be. Little did any of us know it would be 3 years later. But it's a good thing. He made a good decision. And you're right, they paid us directly because we're a third party. And so we were an advocate for them.
And were they able to get reimbursed for some of these costs or all these costs in the settlement?
So I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure they got reimbursed for some of the costs. I'm never involved in the actual settlement, just in the depositions.
Gotcha. Cliff, let me get you in here and then Pete will bring you on.
Well, I think you kind of hit on it, Joe, but it's in these situations, it's hurry up and wait, and what about the restoration contractor, the guy that's drying the building? Did he have to wait, 3 years in order to get paid, or have to discount the bill and services, or, can you do you have any idea, what his financial, situation was? Did he get some money or what happened with him?
I really couldn't speak to the other company.
Okay.
I wasn't privy to that information, Cliff.
Okay, thanks. That's fair.
I mean, I would imagine the church, if the mega church, obviously a big church, they probably had to do something to keep them coming back and putting those machines in there. But, we don't know for sure. I mean,
well, it's probably after, it's, a lot of these things, it's kind of on the come, and, sometimes it doesn't come. That ends up being the problem. And, these guys can just take a huge hit. Their equipment's tied up for weeks or months at a time, and you only have so much equipment that's working for you and it's rented, but if you don't collect the rental bill, it happens.
And there are hundreds of other projects around too that, may not have been as complicated or as,
right.
They weren't as unsure about what was going to happen in the end. All right, let's go to the roundup, Grayson. All right, the roundup brought to us by Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com. We've got the restoration industry global watchdog. You're the guy that set this up, Pete. Let's turn it over to you.
I'm the troublemaker. So it's interesting. I didn't realize that, with the Tramex being the host of the roundup, and Ken, well, he didn't really give a plug for their meter, but he just happened to use their meter because their meter was really good for that. I think that deck scanner for those big flat roofs is really something that, my John T, roofing guy who lives up in Panama City, not too far from Ken in the peninsula, uses for his certification classes for the commercial roofers and also for the building envelope consultants. And if one of those was available, that would have probably saved Ken's back. But the other thing is what they've been experimenting with that particular deck scanner unit is using it on sports floors, gymnasium floors, and hardwood floors. And I've always kind of felt that would have an application for that, because if you can use it on a flat roof, you should be able to use it there. I don't think it's done, but there's a bunch of work being done with that. And I think over, in the coming months, maybe next year, you may start to see some applications for that particular technology on these sports floors when they get flooded to for monitoring and detection and diagnostic work and everything too. But that's the essential tool that's been that they developed years ago for dealing with with flat roofing. And the other item, the which now I think they call it RSW or something, but I don't even remember what it stands for. But we used to call it the leak seeker back in the day in the 90s, and it was around, and we used it at the time, not so much for the floors. We used it for the plaster walls, the concrete, a lot of stuff like that. You had to bend down, and later on they did the little stick. And the big thing with that, and Ken could maybe address that too, how he used it, is that it has, the reason it's called the leak seeker, it has a little dial on it, right? And as it starts to beep, it kind of sends out a signal. And as you get closer, what you're doing is you're playing with that little dial, and you're trying to actually find out where the leak originated. Because a lot of the people are on the call and looking at some of the names, they're familiar with that when you have a leak from a roof and you're looking at it in the building, wherever it entered building, where it originated, it could be, yards. It could be a long way. And that's why this was really used for. The other thing that we found that was really useful too is then the plumbers started using it because behind ceramic walls and the bathroom leaks, and you could use like that, so you don't just take a sledgehammer and start taking a place apart. At least you have an idea, and you could kind of minimize the demolition. So, having a grasp on all this stuff is critical. So, of all the stuff that Ken talked about, so that presentation, which everybody just saw, was part of a panel that we gave in it must have been 2023, because that was after Ian, which was the fall of 2022. It hit and it totally wiped out Fort Myers. It was brutal hurricane. And so that following spring was the last spring experience show that was in the Fort Lauderdale in the Broward County Convention Center. And that was just before the BMP folks kind of took it over. So I talked to Larry Cooper, and we put a panel together on that. And it was called the Floridians. So we had Dr. Moon was supposed to come, but he had one of his engineers, Nolan, fill in on the presentation because Dr. Moon was in a deposition. With Jeremy Beagle, we had Dave Mason, and we had Ken. So those four people represented an engineer, a mold assessor, CIH, a restoration contractor, Mason, and then a very specialty assessor like Ken. And what they did is they gave a presentation on responding to hurricanes from their unique perspectives in dealing with these buildings. And so when Ken was done with that presentation, which he just did, we made PDFs of all their presentations, and everyone who attended that actually got it. A lot of times people don't want to give their PowerPoints away, but we did. Now, I had told Ken at the time, as I can, eventually, we only have a part of the story because, there was like he said, the saga just was beginning. And I said, well, if you ever get a chance to actually eventually, and I had been out to the church a couple of times while this was happening, and it's only half hour for me. I'd visited with the guys. I met the pastor. I was watching the progress. I saw the inside, I got the whole drill. And I said, well, I like to see how that turns out, because the way that we learn is by sharing our experiences, telling the stories, and then say, look, these are the lessons. How can we apply it? And that's how the industry learns and grows. As long as there's not information that's confidential, it can't be shared, but you give what you can. So essentially what happened was, I said, I forgot about it, and that was the end of it. So when we're working up to put the program together for winter break next year, which I started a couple of months ago, Ken said to me, Pete, we finally wrapped that thing up. I said, yeah, but I didn't even let him finish the sentence. I said, absolutely, you'll be on the program. Write me an abstract. And we want to tell the story, because you couldn't tell the story until it was actually settled. And they're ready to put the roof on. Like he said, they're getting ready to put the roof, watching them put the roof on. That's not the end of the story. That'll happen, and then they'll put a roof on. We don't need to tell people, that there's no lesson to be learned there. You're going to put a new roof on. The lessons are from the mitigation to everything he was just talking about, to the settlement, how they actually get the money, why they did it, which he talked about, the community, angle of it, and all of that, and how they finally settled. One of the things that I remember Ken saying early on, the insurance company had agreed that it was a covered loss. Now, Ken can correct me on this, but they agreed that it was a covered loss. And everybody got comfortable because they figured, okay, they'll write the check will come and we can move on with the roof. Well, somehow it stalled between, it's covered, and, well, we're not sure we're going to pay, however that went. And Ken was telling the story. But anyone who's been in this business, they recognize and understand that's kind of part of how these processes are, particularly in these CAT claims, because you have a situation where you have people who are outside people who are contracted agents who are coming in. They're not from the community. They leave, and then you got a lot of communication stuff. So if it wasn't for all this documentation, that's the biggest lesson, I think, which Ken's going to pass on when he does the full presentation, is the step-by-step documenting, having it, keeping it. And you need a third party in order to do that when you have these real high-risk things, because by the time someone's sitting in a deposition and it's being contested several years later, if you don't have that, you're going to be in deep doo-doo. And anyway, that's the moral and the essence of this whole case study. So I'm so happy that Ken's going to be able to do it. The abstract for the final story, I already sent it to Cliff and you guys. So I think it'd be a good idea to include it in the blog, before we send it out next week. And then Ken will build off of what he already showed in the PowerPoint, and then put the rest of the stages to tell the rest of the story, and that'll be the presentation that he's going to give at the winter break in Bonita Springs next year. I actually have him. He's at the end of day one. I have him as the cleanup hitter, and he's going to be following Mike McGinnis. There's a whole afternoon program, so trust me. You talk about the yin and the yang. You're going to have the Jersey boy, who is, we all know Mr. Mike, and he likes to have fun, but he doesn't take himself seriously, but he takes what he does very seriously, as most of us do. And then you're going to have Ken, who's dead serious. And I already told Ken, he always wants to wear a suit. Ken, do not wear a suit. If you wear a suit, I'm coming after you with a pair of scissors. I'm going to cut your tie off. We actually, Stebrick, years ago in the early days of summer camp, when people would go to the business meeting and they would kind of get dressed up and they want to wear a tie and all that. But then if they would come over to the summer camp compound for the dinner and all that, he had scissors out. He did cut one guy's tie off. After that, to work it out, I said, when you come over to summer camp, it's summer camp. You don't wear suits and ties. It could be muddy, and it's a business casual, shorts and sneakers, business casual for the meeting, but short and sneakers, for that kind of thing. So Ken, just be casual, business casual, wear your polo shirt or whatever you're going to wear, but no suit and tie. And so anyway, I think that I'm very excited about to see it. So Ken, before we kind of sign off here, what else do you want to say that Cliff could take notes on, that you want to kind of open up now, that you'll delve into more detail for the actual presentation, meaning where you just left off now? And before we went to the roundup, you did weigh in with a bunch of really important points. Cliff's taking notes like crazy, because if Cliff asks a question, that's because he's ready to take a note, and because he didn't understand, because nobody writes a blog like the Z-Man. You got anything else you want to kind of share for the audience and for the blog, before we kind of wrap the show up, Ken?
One thing I'd like to say, I'm actually going to just expand on something, Pete, that I had said, that there's really never too much documentation. In this particular project, it was convenient in that was my base camp. So I was actually at the parking lot in my mobile office, but documenting everything. I mean, pictures are free. They don't cost us anything anymore to speak of. And you never know what's going to be important. I documented this project to the nth degree. It was an exercise in really love and care for the people. I wanted to see them come out good. But in regards to professionalism, I thought to myself, there's no way that the time that I spend on this is going to be wasted. At some point, and I didn't know it would be 3 years later, at some point, some of this is going to matter. So I documented. I knew if the LGRs were working properly. I documented the intake and the output of the desiccants. I documented their when they started, when they were turned off. All of that stuff was documented, and it really turned out to be very helpful.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. Is that you know, having the documentation when these jobs are very complex, particularly when there's a lot of people involved, like there are in these cat losses, and a lot of them don't live locally, and then it's very easy for someone to say, "Well, I didn't recall saying that. We didn't say that." You know, like you said before, Ken, if it's not written down, it never happened. And I think that, and then if you suspect there are going to be coverage issues or there's going to be litigation, then you really almost need to. It needs to be documented, cubed or squared. You know, and really at a much higher degree. So you won't get any argument from anyone who's been around and been involved in those kind of claims to do that. I mean, you have to weigh it, in my opinion, with the budget, the cost. Someone has to pay for all that. So I think it's important that we're really clear. And that's essentially what the meeting of the minds is in order to have a legal and binding contract. It's legal language, a meeting of the minds, that each of the parties to the claim are very clear on what's going to be done, why it's being done, and what it's going to cost. And I think you had that with the pastor, because at the end of the day, he was the asset owner, and he was the one who ultimately was responsible for the work that you did. So I sometimes, a lot of guys, they rush in to do stuff and they forget about that part of it. They forget who the real, air quote, customer is. It's the person that's really signing your agreements, but also is going to assure that you're going to get paid regardless of how, you know, the insurance settlement goes, particularly in these type of losses. And if you
Let
have
me
that,
comment on that just for 1
Go ahead.
second. I love what you said.
Okay.
The file that we produce at ETA, we call it a RFT file, ready for trial. And the reason for that is you can never go backwards. You can never document something that happened that you didn't document. And so the file itself can be handed to insurance adjuster, public adjuster, a lawyer. All of that's there, and it's all completely in order, ready for trial. Hopefully you never go to trial. Hopefully it's a little overkill. But you know the old saying, you can always cut a board shorter, but you can never cut it longer. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, well, that's an old home builder thing. It says you measure twice, you cut once.
Yeah.
And so, no, I don't disagree with that. The point I was trying to make is that there is a cost involved to do that level of documentation, and you need to be clear on the front end. And you were, because a lot of times people will make certain assumptions, and then later on, if there's lack of coverages or whatever, they'll say, "Well, why do we need to do all of that?" And you only learn that from experience. I think that, well, anyway, those are the lessons we learn. And these are, you know, this is why I wanted to do this trial run like we have done, because you'll get some feedback and it'll be talking points when you develop the final presentation you're going to give next February, because that there will be no interruption. You'll have your time to just present it. Then we'll have a little Q&A, because it'll be at the end of the day. So we're going to have moderated Q&A with the group and all, and that'll be good. But, you know, you're going to present your case within the time frame, and I think that'll be good. So, you know, excellent job. And there'll be a lot of good lessons that will be able to be passed on for the people that are going to be sitting in the room for that. And anyway, so Joe,
Thank you,
one
Pete.
thing.
Pete, I got a couple of things.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Cliff.
well, go ahead, Cliff. Yeah, what I wanted to say was we actually didn't run that much over, because normally we go from, we say call in 11:45 and allowed to 1:15 in case we run over. It's only 1:20, so considering we were talking sports for a half hour, we actually did pretty good.
Go ahead, Cliff.
I think there are two things, Pete, that I'd like to mention. You know, I think going back to this, you know, you're going to have restoration contractors in the room and so on and so forth, and they're concerned about the money, okay? And the second thing is just a suggestion, and you know, I'm just kind of throwing it out there. If Ken could either check and figure out how the restoration contractor made out on that particular project, I think the audience would like to know that. And I also think, Ken, I don't know how far the pastor is away from Bonita Springs or whatever, but if you could get him there or get a statement from him or a video or whatever, just some lessons learned as the asset owner and so on and so forth. And I think that this is something that people could learn from all these different perspectives. The estimators and assessors are going to learn from your experiences, but this could have been a catastrophe for that pastor. I mean, and for that community. I think you saved the day, but I think having him tell the story from his perspective, I think it would be very, very valuable. So just a suggestion.
So Cliff, let me comment on that. The church is not too, Fort Myers is not too far from the airport that everyone is flying into. It's only about less than a half hour to Bonita Springs to the venue for winter break. I think that's a good idea. Ken, can probably, he knows the pastor pretty well, as do some of the other associates that worked with him on the job. And we'll find out whether the pastor wants to come, not so much to talk, but I think if he comes at the tail end of the day, if he's in the room, maybe for the Q&A, and then we roll day one, we roll right into the opening, the banquet, the networking dinner. I'll hang around for that. We'll buy dinner for the pastor, Ken, and he can be around. He'll be like the superstar. Now, the one thing that we actually have a precedent at summer camp for this, Cliff. I don't think you were there that year, but the one year that the award for the Phoenix Award was given, it was a whole group of people. It was Pinto, it was Stamper, Danny Greenblatt. There was a whole slew of them, and they did a job in the tower in Detroit. They all did that, right? But what happened is that
there was
year,
a big lawsuit with that too.
It was a huge thing, and Stebrick was a consultant on it with a couple other people.
Right.
So what happened is they did an hour and a half presentation on that presentation at summer camp. It was the last day of the summer camp, the last hour and a half after lunch on a Wednesday. And they actually brought the guy in from the tower. His name was Vinny, I remember. That was, he was like the main property contact for doing it. And Stebrick introduced him and he goes, "This guy is right out of Central Casting." And he was. You would have thought he pulled him off the Hollywood lot. But it was a huge hit. There were 500 people in there and it was fabulous. So Ken, what do you think the odds are? That pastor, I think he's an Italian boy from Brooklyn, as I recall, because I hit it off with him, and he's a very serious man, and he's very personable. What do you think? Do you think the pastor would be interested in coming down for that, Ken? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I could just ask him.
Yeah.
And if not coming down, he has a podcast. He has a room that he records in. Maybe we'll get a video from him. I could ask him.
Yeah, but you know what? You and Alan can kind of tag team him, right? And the thing is, and to tell him, he'll remember me maybe a couple times I was there. So remember that?
You're unforgettable. No, everyone remembers.
Right. But what I'm thinking is, if he comes down on that day, tell him to get on his calendar. You tell him he can come down, listen to your presentation. Then we're going to roll right into Q&A. Then we're going to have dinner. There's going to be 150 people there that will be interested. He'll be like the little star for the thing. Cliff always has brilliant ideas. You ought to really think about that. The podcast, doing the video, that's all good. But him being there in person, that's Central Casting stuff, and that's what Winter Break and Summer Camp is all about. Is putting a personal touch to everything. What do you think about that, Radio Joe? That'd be fabulous.
Sounds good to me. I think you ought to have him say a little prayer before dinner, Pete.
Right? There you go. Don't say that the Radio Joe and the Z-Man, these guys, they can tag team and come up with great ideas. You know what, Ken? If you tell the pastor we're going to have him actually say grace before the dinner, he's coming down for sure. How can he say no to that?
All right, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Ken, I want to, before we go, we always give you the last word. Anything we missed that you'd like to add? Any final thoughts?
Not about that project, but I just like to talk about IIT Radio. I have enjoyed this for years. I appreciate you, Joe. I appreciate you, Cliff. Thank you so much for what you guys do.
Well, thank you, Ken. That's what keeps us going. 17 years now, right, Cliff? Maybe 18. I don't know. We're going on 20. I know that.
There's hearts there. I don't know how we did that.
I think it is 20 because it was 2006 when it was Talk Show, when no one even knew what a podcast was. And Joe Rogan was still, he was an MMA announcer.
Yeah.
So, so next year will be 20 years of IICRC radio, and that's a seminal year, boys.
Sounds good.
2 decades. Yeah.
All right. This is Radio Joe saying thanks to this week's guest, Ken Siders. Thanks very much, Ken. It's great to see you. My co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Slotnick, the restoration industry global watchdog, Pete Consigli, our engineer, Grayson Gone Fish and Fisher, and of course, our sponsors and loyal audience. Next week, we welcome back Dr. Ralph Moon and Jeremy Beagle. We're going to talk about post-remediation verification on water damage projects. Please come back and join us then for the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.
All right. Good job.